Boom, and there it is, the new intro hitting for this season of Offside Hockey Talk. And we got a regular face joining us tonight, none other than Terry Koshan of the Toronto Sun, Leafs beat reporter. Terry, how's the summer been?
It's been good, James. A little, but the same amount of time in these parts, as you well know, with the Maple Leafs and their, affinity for going out early. But it's gone by relatively fast, I guess. And a couple of bookends, right? The changing of the coach from Keefe to Berube in May, and then the changing of the captain from Austin Matthews from John Tavares a few weeks ago. So I think we're all ready to get going here. There's no doubt. I know the players are probably really getting that itch now, and certainly we are on our side as well. And the good news is camp is now less than 2 weeks away.
That's always a good feeling. There's got to be a lot of guys in town right now. I'm seeing all the snapshots of guys out golfing or having brunch or whatever it is, what have you. That's got to be a good feeling too, seeing those guys show up in formal skates and things like that.
Yeah, and it's in the past we've seen guys trickling into town maybe a little later and staying in their respective off-season homes and skating with whatever NHL guys happen to be there. But I think we're seeing more with this Leaf group that a lot of them being from the area still, more than we've seen in the past games. So they're in at the facility all summer long. They get the youngsters in there, and I think in the end it just benefits everybody. But yeah, it is good. But like I said, they'll be raring to go once they get on the ice on the 19th.
That's for sure. Well, let's talk about it. The Leaf summer was what to you? How do you feel? How does the gut feel? What's your first thought that comes to mind about the Leaf summer?
Well, I think it was what you'd expect from a team that went out in the first round. Whether you disagree or agree with the coaching change, I mean, it's done. So it happened in May, and do I think Sheldon Keefe will go on to good things in the Jersey Devils? Sure, I do. He's young. He's got a good future ahead of him. It just didn't work here in the playoffs. Craig Berube is a fresh set of eyes, a fresh set of everything. Lane Lambert is going to be the associate coach, another real voice of experience on that bench. Mark Savard, what does he do with the offense? So that's the big major change. Obviously, James, there's no doubt. I mean, it didn't come in the way in through free agency or obviously via trade. I like the additions of Tanev, Ekman Larson, and Stolarz in goal. You keep Max Domi longer term. We'll see how that works out in the long run. But like I said, it is what you'd expect and need to happen from the team that went out in the first round. And as far as the bigger question mark, I suppose going into the season might be the Mitch Marner situation, but I don't really think it is right now. I think it's those waters have settled. He will be at camp when it starts, and from the word being that he's had a good summer of training and is ready to go, and we'll see where the season takes it. But if the initial impression is he's had good meetings with Craig Berube. He indicated that to us the day that Matthews was named captain. So, like I said, it was it a summer that will blow you away? I don't think it was, but I think it was a summer still where, Brad Treliving had to get some things done. Like I said, the coaching change, we'll see where that goes, but he shores up some things in the blue line, and he adds a guy in net that, hasn't played a ton in the NHL, but has shown that when he is in there, he can be dependable.
Well, let's talk about the Mitch Marner thing first, right quick here. You mentioned the offseason. Obviously, everybody's waiting for that shoe to fall, whether it be him or John Tavares out of town, the $11 million ticket. It didn't happen. Now, this market with media, with us, with podcasters, guys who write articles, it doesn't matter. It tends to be a dark cloud when there's something like this hanging over the Maple Leafs. You look at Marner the first time, Nylander, the Babcock situation. Anytime there's something wrong, it follows this team because everybody wants that answer or conclusion or whatever it needs to be. So, Mitch Marner, is this going to be a huge distraction and problem for the Leafs, or do they find a way to get out ahead of it and just say, listen, this is the way it's going to be. This is it. We're not answering any more questions about it, because guys are still going to ask. Different markets, different reporters are still going to ask daily as well.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to be as big as a distraction as we might be thinking right now. I just don't think it will. Was it a distraction last year for Willie Nylander before he signed eventually in January, right? It really wasn't.
Trey Living did come out and say that he wanted Matthews and Nylander.
Yeah,
and
there is that. So there is that public support of those two that Marner hasn't necessarily had to that strength. Correct. That doesn't. I don't think it should indicate though that the Leafs think that they're going into the season. It will be their last with Mitch Marner. I think the preference would be to sign him. I think Mitch Marner's preference would be to sign in Toronto. I just don't think it's happening anytime soon. Is it a January thing like we saw with Nylander? I don't know about that either. Mitch Marner is represented by Darren Ferris, who is fine with players going to free agency if he's not encouraging it. We'll see to what degree, if at all, the Leon Draisaitl contract impacts all of this. I mean, that's just coming out now in the past few weeks. Him officially signing with the Oilers and where that takes things to the Maple Leafs. But we'll have to see. But as far as impacting, I don't think it's going to impact the way that Mitch Marner plays. I really don't. I don't. Dark cloud, I suppose, to a degree, but I don't know that it's going to be something that follows the player around. And if it does, I don't think you're going to see suddenly a big drop in his output. I think he's just too talented for that to happen.
Yeah, just look at this season and say two key players of the core four, so to speak, in Mitch Marner and John Tavares on expiring deals.
Yeah.
And now John Tavares, obviously, I still am of the camp. He didn't get stripped of the C. I think he passed the torch.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of probably knew it was coming, whether it was this season or the season after when his contract was done. One way or another, it was coming to a head.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he just did the company face, did the right thing, passed it on. And I still think he's going to be a leader for this team. But any other market, these stories here really don't seem to be a thing. I mean, you look at Detroit right now.
Mm-hmm.
Morris Seider, Lucas Raymond not signed, but it's not doom and gloom. It's not the sky is falling like it usually is in Toronto. So that's why I asked that question, because we tend to make a big deal out of it. Other markets really kind of don't.
Well, and then ask what they're thinking in Boston too, right? With Jeremy Swayman. I mean, I think you're looking at a deal there where, the sides seem pretty far apart. And, any comparable to Toronto as well, at least, the Toronto guy in Marner, I know it's a completely different situation, contract that he's going to be at camp and ready to go. And the Bruins can't say that about arguably their best player. So, again, I don't know. I don't. A dark cloud is what however the player perceives that. Again, I don't think that it's really going to be an issue here. I really don't for Mitch.
So we go from Sheldon Keefe to Craig Berube, and my thinking here is when these young players came into the league, they needed a coach, kind of like Sheldon Keefe, not to hold their hand, but he identified with the young players when they came in and was able to do the right things and get the most out of these guys in the regular season, not so much the playoffs. Now these guys are kind of seasoned a little bit. They understand the ins and outs of the NHL. Is bringing in a coach like Craig Berube now probably the right time to kind of push some of those extra buttons that maybe Sheldon Keefe didn't push with a more veteran voice? And I think of Babcock and the message he was trying to relay when he first was here and the things that he did with these players, kind of a more old school kind of coach, which I think Berube kind of harkens back to, more of the crest on the front, not the name on the back. If you don't play my way, you kind of sit, which is kind of the way he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, like Treliving said back in May, he just felt a new voice was needed. And I think that what you're talking about, James, is what he was getting at. And what kind of an impact can Berube have in the postseason? The thing that's interesting to me is, the one thing about Sheldon Keefe, he's going to have detractors, right? As all coaches who are fired do. Still led the Leafs to 300-point seasons in each of his 382-game seasons behind the bench. So what kind of improvement, quote unquote, will we see from Craig Berube in the regular season that we can really put a finger on and say, okay, this is how we know they're going to be that much better in the playoffs? We aren't going to know. We won't know because the same rule applies with the different coach. It's a different type of hockey that's played in the playoffs. Does a different type of voice have that impact now? And like you say, I think there's something to be said too, again, about all of these guys who are a year older. They do have that experience now. The Leafs and the Bruins are tied for the longest streak in making the playoffs at 8 years each. And so they know how to get there. And, even looking back at the 7-game series to the Bruins, you don't play the whole series with your best players, and you get to within 1 goal of advancing, and you have to rely on a guy in net who you're no longer relying on, and all of these factors, and they still nearly won that series. So if that happens, they go on to play in the second round, then you and I are probably talking about a few different things today, no matter how things went in the second round for them. But it didn't, and here we are. But the one difference too is you bring in a new voice. It's true, but you look at the relationship that Keefe and Willie Nylander had. They were together from day one, more or less. Willie's pro career to start, right? Give or take. And Keefe knew which buttons to push, which ones to leave alone. And Willie Nylander became a better hockey player in the past few years. There's no doubt about that. Some of that has to do with talent, of course. But so, what is a different voice now? How quickly does it's one thing to sit with players and talk to them all summer, and that's fine. That's all part of it. But now in a few weeks, like we said, they're going to get on the ice, and you're going to see some changes that way. But what kind of impact does Berube have then? And like I said, I don't think a guy like Lambert in his experience, you just push him to the side either. I think that there will be some influence there as well. And I just John Tavares, an interesting case, like you mentioned. Where will he be in a year? I'm not. Initially, I thought it would have been a little bit much to change the captaincy now with the year left on his deal, but it was pretty clear that he was okay with it and on board with it. It was the right move for the Maple Leafs to make. But yeah, of the biggest things that happened during the summer, the coaching change, I think, has the potential at least to be the most impactful for sure.
Yeah, I really do think it will be. And it's not just, like you said, Berube, obviously Lane Lambert, Mark Savard. This power play has been one that's stalled out in the playoffs. Maybe Savard has something that can make this work differently. Maybe they go to 2 units. Mm-hmm. Maybe they start to spread things around a little bit more, maybe more of a net front presence. Obviously, there's still rumors they're kicking around on JVR and a couple of other guys. So who knows who comes in and helps that. But I do think that the different voices here are going to make a difference. It may take a little bit, and we may even see a little bit of a regression in the regular season as this team figures things out, but it benefits in the postseason, if you get what I'm saying.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, something's going to have to happen in that regard, because if we're talking about this next year and the Leafs get 100 points again and they're out again in the first round, you haven't solved anything.
No.
And really with this talent, they should be knocking on doors further in the playoffs than they have been in the past.
It's so weird, though. Like, you look at the first round exits, and it sucks, because obviously I'd love to see them go on a run. You'd love to see them go on a run. It's great. Mm-hmm. But every time you hear the team that they've played, I mean, Brad Marchand, for crying out loud, said that the Leafs were the toughest matchup until the Stanley Cup final. Mm-hmm. That was the hardest one. Even this one here, when the Bruins, same thing. They were the hardest matchup. Everybody keeps saying it. So this team is there. It's just, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's a mental thing with the big guys up front or whatever, they just can't get over the hump. This year was goal scoring again.
Yep.
They can't find it in the playoffs. And I think if a guy like Bobby McMann, and I know it's weird to say, some guy who got hot on the second half of the season, he was just a difference maker. Yep. His size, the way he was playing, the way he fit in the lineup, his shot, I think if he was in versus Boston, would have been great. Would have been a guy that you really could use as an extra weapon. And not to mention the goaltending, when you got the guy who just got traded to Ottawa saying that Joe Woll should have been in net the entire time and looked at him as a higher echelon goalie, that gives me hope. But it's like, why weren't these things the things that happened?
Yeah.
And obviously with McMahon, you can't bring a guy in who's hurt. I get that. But I think Woll should have started.
Well, you know what? As far as looking back, I will say this. If they have Marner, Matthews, and Nylander in the lineup for all 7 games together, they're moving on. Might not even be a 7-game series.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you.
So Willie misses the first half. Boston gets sick. It just you have all those 3 together, and they can't. Like I said, you didn't, and they still came within a goal in Game 7. So and Bobby McMahon, interesting guy there, and I'm really curious to see what he does this year, James. I know I talked to in the few days there were between the end of the regular season, the first round of the playoffs. I called a few scouts, said sides was up for me, And one guy said, look, my dark horse would be, if he's able to get back and play for the Maple Leafs, Bobby McMahon. And, that just goes to what you thought of the impact he probably would have had in the series had he been healthy. But, I think Leafs fans should really be looking forward to the potential that he has in the season coming up.
Yeah, well, I mean, a lot of people are already penciling him in on the left side. He's the first or second guy, depending on what lineup sheet you look at, just because of the impact he had and the ability to play with top players, which is a thing that's no easy thing to do.
Yeah.
We'll ask about this guy here. He wants to play with top 6 players, now preferably not with the Maple Leafs. It's Nick Robertson. I'm thinking this year might be his best opportunity with the Leafs when you only have Nyes and McMahon ahead of you on the depth chart, 2 guys that are inexperienced in the NHL, and one guy, like I said, last year just caught fire, another guy who just played his first full season. So Robertson would seem to have an easier path if he came, showed up, showed out, and did what he needed to do. He probably could be a skilled winger for this team and a valuable piece at a lower cap hit, of course. But he doesn't want to be here. Do you see Nick Robertson being traded? For me, I don't see there's enough value right now for the Maple Leafs to trade him and get anything of substance back.
I agree. The Leafs can just sit this out or sit on this for as long as they want. There's no pressure on them to get him in the lineup. Would they prefer him in the lineup? Of course they would. But Robertson doesn't have leverage here. And the thing that I find puzzling with this, and maybe this comes out in the wash in the next couple of weeks, so you're the young player, you want to change the scenery. Okay, fine, understood. But a change of the coach is the next best thing. I would imagine Nick Robertson would probably tell you that the Maple Leafs have treated him so well, especially given the way he's, all the injuries he's had and everything. And, they've always believed in him, and, it just hasn't happened. But now that there's a change in coach, if I'm him, I'd be thinking, okay, well, this is what I want. It's not going to be in a different city, but there's somebody new behind the bench, a new set of eyes. It's not just like we talked about, not Berube, but almost the whole staff, and let's see where this goes. But if I'm Nick Robertson, knowing the motor that I have and the talent that I have, I'm thinking, okay, the only thing I want to do is get this contract done, get into camp, and show this guy that I can do this, because a lot of times the proof has been there when he has been healthy that he can play. We've seen it. He puts the puck in the net. Got to the point last year where Sheldon Keefe was even joking too, James, about it seems like every time we put him back in, he scores. And it probably did happen on 4 or 5 or 6 occasions. So, you're thinking, well, why did he just stay in? But still working to get that trust. A young player, that's fine. But, I would just think that a little piece of Nick Robertson has to be looking at this going, okay, it's a new guy. The guy that I had the issue with is gone. Let's go see where this can work. But it hasn't happened yet. Having said that, we're still, less than 2 weeks. There's still a lot of time for something to get done here before the medicals happen in 10 days.
Yeah, no, there's lots of time for things to happen. I look at this too for Nick Robertson. This is a guy who hasn't really got to play much hockey, period.
Right.
Due to injuries, due to the COVID lockout and all that kind of stuff where he wasn't able to play, this guy really hasn't had much ice time to develop and play. So this would be a great season for him. And a guy that I use as kind of a template of this is Jake DeBrusk in Boston. Wanted a trade, wanted out, signed his little bridge deal, played his arse off, did well, and now got a payday from Vancouver. So, I mean, there is a path here where you can say, hey, I come in, I play, I show up, I show out, I do my thing. And then when it's time, I can go get paid and play wherever I want if I'm still unhappy. But I think this season could be a chance for him to be happy in Toronto. I get the yo-yo thing where you're up and down and you're upset because you're a cap casualty on a 2-way contract and you want some stability in the NHL. But that was the business aspect of it. Now I'm thinking probably the Leafs are saying, hey, you have a solid opportunity here to come in and make a case for yourself.
Put it this way, James. He cannot make a case for himself if he's at home. Period. Right?
Yeah.
So there's no benefit for him not to be in the ice in the 19th in blue and white. This isn't. So we'll see where it goes. But like we keep saying, on paper, it's there. All due respect to that left side, Matthew Nyes can take another step this year. Yes. Bobby McMahon can as well. After that, it's Robertson's job to lose, I think. And, he could even move up, but you can't do that if you're sitting at home.
No, you can't. And you can't show anybody anything.
No. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes. But like I say, on the calendar, it doesn't look like a lot, but there is still some time here to get something done.
Oh, for sure. The other thing here for the Maple Leafs, obviously, we talked about it for a moment there. We painted with a little bit of a brush, but let's go the full stroke. The Leafs D, is it the most complete it's been in Morgan Rielly's tenure? They finally have someone to play with them in Chris Tanev. Yep. They have another guy who can dish the puck out and play pretty well in Oliver Ekman-Larsson. They also have, go down the lineup there a little ways, Cade Weber, a guy who's coming, who looks to be maybe a big shutdown type guy, models his game, he says, after a Jake Muzzin type. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to see that. But is this the most complete Leafs D we've seen in a long time?
Well, I don't know if I go that far, but it's, there's on paper, a Rielly Tanev pairing looks good. They have to get that chemistry, of course, when they get out there on the ice together. And we'll see where that goes. I'm not saying that I doubt that it's going to happen, but I would imagine the potential for it is to work. But let's see it happen first. Ekman-Larsson to me is interesting because, it went sideways for him in Vancouver, but he brought his game around last year in Florida. Now it's on him to continue that. And what kind of, chance does he get in a new look power play under Marc Savard? Is it with the one unit? Is it like you kind of alluded to, James? Is it more of a where you're not going all the way in on one? So there's good talent on both units, equal talent on both units, and he gets a look on the second one anyway. It's going to be somewhere, one or the other, that he will be playing on it. And like you said, his ability to move the puck on a team that has the type of talent at forward the Leafs do is going to be crucial. But he has had hiccups, and he has something to prove this year, and that's that Florida was not a one-off for him last season. So I like that. I like the one thing we did find out the Leafs late last year is the Benoit McCabe pairing was really solid. Yes. And I think going forward, when you're trying to move things around on the blue line and see who fits where, Craig Berube is much smarter than you and I. You can probably look at it and say Benoit and McCabe might be okay together. So we'll see. But I like that pairing. And you talk about things going into season that you don't know. Well, a year ago, do you put Simone Benoit there? I don't think so.
Nope. Everybody kind of clamoring.
Yeah, we have him way down the depth chart with William Lagesson, and we know that he didn't end up finishing the season with the Leafs, but so a lot can happen. But I think with the Benoit McCabe pairing, they know what they have. Bit of a dark horse, not dark horse, not the right word, but where does Timothy Liljegren wind up fitting into all this? Is it with Ekman-Larsson? That's going to be interesting to me to see it play out. But most complete. Let's give it some games first before we call it that.
And all right, no, fair enough. I just look at it on paper as probably the best it's been in a while.
Yeah.
And, when you look at the pairings that Rielly has had, whether it's Ron Hainsey, no disrespect, or go down the list. I mean, the guy's played with Luke Schenn. Yeah. Chris Tanev probably is at the top of that list without even playing a game yet with Morgan Rielly. But you're right. The chemistry needs to develop first.
Right. And
the other guy that we don't know about is Yanni Hakanpää.
Well, I think we know about it. If there was going to be anything, I think it would had to have been announced by now. You'd think. I'll be like, it could still happen, I guess, but I'll be more surprised now if that does. I mean, Brad Treliving told us on August 14th that something might be around the corner. Well, here we are nearly a month later, and there's been nothing yet. So,
do you think they bring him to camp and just see what he's able to do?
Well, possibly.
On a PTO style?
Yeah, perhaps, but the player has to agree to that too. But obviously they're not going to do that if they think that the injury really is as bad as we were led to believe, and you believe that because he hasn't signed yet. When it certainly seemed like nearly 2.5 months ago now it was going to be done on July 1. So, I think if you're looking at the Leafs right now and their defense core, Jamie, don't pencil them in. I wouldn't go so far as to do that and then see where that goes. But I would just think that the longer it goes with anything official, the clearer the answer becomes. Like I said, could be wrong, but that's what the hunch would be.
No, that's fair. And there's a guy that I was kind of excited for, obviously, kind of a guy you rely on the penalty kill, shots, kind of physical, right? So me, I've been looking for one of those guys on the Leafs for a while. McCabe brings a little bit of that, but I love when Shen was here. That was kind of his MO. Benoit too. So to have another one like Yanni Hakanpää would have been great. But if the knee isn't good, I don't think the Leafs are interested in having a guy ride the LTIR.
No, and I would think too that they've had an idea of to what degree, if at all, he's been on the ice this summer and all that sort of thing. So it's like I said, it would be too bad because I think there was the obvious thought there that he could come in and help them on the PK, like you say. But if not, you move on. Like, after all, we're not talking about a Norris Trophy candidate here. You move on and you make do with what you're going to have. So, having said all that, like I said, I do like the additions of Tanev and Ekman-Larsson. There's a potential for both.
No, definitely. And I'm wondering for you, like, obviously we haven't seen much of him, but he was pretty quick to sign when the Leafs got his rights, and that was Cade Weber. He looks like a nice project, a kind of blue chip defenseman, I guess you could say, for them. Do you see him making any noise at camp or any strides or anything like that? Or have you heard anybody talking about him? Because for me, I see the size and I'm like, this could be something.
Yeah, he's big. There's no doubt. He's a big kid. You know what? Probably one of those guys that whether he makes noise at camp, tough to, I would think, to crack the top six. Give him a good hard run in the American League and see what he can do. Right?
Yeah.
And go from there. And if he becomes a player that you think will help the team, then you make that decision. But it's probably asking for a little bit much for him to come in and make that impact right away in camp. But we have seen these things happen before in the past. I just think when you look at that top six right now, probably a bit of a tougher nut for him to crack, but certainly somebody that they can look forward to in the future for sure.
For sure. All right. Well, something we are going to look forward to is Joe Woll and Anthony Stolarz between the pipes for the Maple Leafs. That looks like the tandem. Looks like the seasoned veteran will be Matt Murray. Obviously, he'll to be running the crease down in the AHL. What do you think of the tandem? Obviously, the inexperience has been talked about ad nauseum. For me, I look at Joe Woll, and there's been a lot of positives. Obviously, the injuries he had last year weren't your normal run-of-the-mills. There's kind of a couple freak ones. So it's not something that should be reoccurring or nagging to him. Ones that he can recover from and move on from, which is nice. The back one, maybe you get a little bit weary about. But again, this guy, he looks the real deal, looks like the real McCoy. And then Stolarz as well. Hungry, ready, but understands the backup role playing behind Bob. And this tandem could do well. I'm wondering, are you comfortable with this crease? Or is this something where we're all going to kind of bide the time and see what actually happens with these guys?
Well, to me, there are two big questions going into the Leafs season, and aside from the Marner stuff and everything. What impact does Craig Berube have? How does Joe Woll stay healthy? That's, to me, that is key. The Joe Woll's health, and like you say, James, some of the things that have happened to him have been out of the ordinary. I mean, you can watch the injury that happened in Ottawa last December and try to figure out where it happened on that play, and you're not going to get a good answer because it just looks so routine.
Yeah.
But having said that, then, can that happen again? And is there a worry about that? I think there is for the Maple Leafs. Why wouldn't there be with the history? But if he can stay healthy, like you say, the things that he's done when he's been in there have been really good, and he's shown that he can be that guy. I guess the question is, if not, then the bigger question might be, are you comfortable with Stolarz and Murray as a tandem to get them through those times when Woll's not in the lineup? Now, in a perfect world, you never get the answer to that question because Woll gets over these injury things and he's in there. But Stolarz is a guy who, like I said earlier, hasn't played a ton in any NHL season. When he has played, he's been good. He was, he has the experience last year of being with the team in Florida and, winning the Stanley Cup. Just like Ekman-Larsson did, of course, and perhaps even Stephen Lawrence in a PTO. But Stolarz, there'll be some familiarity there. Played with Marner in London for a time, and he might have with Domi too. I can't remember, but
he did.
So there is the experience of both of them, right? So there's not, walking in a new room and getting to know guys. He will know them right away. They know him, but could he be that guy then? If push comes to shove and he needs to be, well, maybe we'll find out. But I think that Woll, the injury thing is the key. And like I said, if he's healthy, there's no reason to believe that he can't be a number one because he has shown, and when he has played, that he's been that good. They have been brief spurts and that sort of thing, and coming up and down. But he was doing the same things with the Marlies. It's not like he came out of he was called up by the Leafs and they were keeping their fingers crossed. He's good in the minors as well. So, but that's going to be a key issue for them. And unless you believe that Stolarz could suddenly become a number one, which he hasn't done yet in the NHL, in the event is the Woll gets hurt. But right now these are hypotheticals. We assume that everyone's going to be healthy in a couple of weeks to hit the ice, and then you go from there. But the one key thing, you look back at the exit interviews and stuff that we did with the management side, and Treving saying at the time in May, James, okay, we got to get to the heart of what's happening with Woll here and these injuries, and they've had a whole summer to figure it out with the staff, and the hope would be that they have. But on paper right now, yeah, I think there should be some confidence in the tandem, because we all know that when Woll does play, he's good.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely lights out. Do you think we get a chance to see the Hildebeest between the pipes for the Leafs this season if things do go awry? Obviously, Matt Murray, nobody knows. That's an outlier too, right? Exactly. Nobody knows if he's actually really going to be ready for NHL action. He was cleared, I guess, in the playoffs, but it's still, he's coming back off the hip stuff, and it's kind of weird, man. I mean, I'd love to see the Hildebeest get a taste.
Yeah, it could happen. But again, the Leafs aren't signing Murray if there's a question there. If they don't think he can't come in and do something for them if needed, right? There's no way. I mean, maybe you go back and re-sign Martin Jones instead, right? So the health issues seem to be in the past. You just hope, again, that they don't recur, that they have in the past with him. But, Dennis Hildeby, again, he does the things he does in the minors. The Leafs clearly weren't comfortable trying him out last year. But we'll see if it gets to that. We know that in goaltending in the NHL and the way the injuries occur, you could get to Hill to be awfully fast, perhaps.
Yeah.
But the Leafs will probably tell you that if they are getting to him at some point, then they don't like the injury trouble that got them there. So we'll have to see where that goes. But he could make it a point too, where if he is lights out with the Marlies, that you can't ignore him, right?
No, you give him a little bit of a taste just to keep that appetite and keep that hunger going too. And it looks like the Leafs pipeline for goaltending is pretty good too. A couple of Russian kids too. Yeah. So it's nice to see this. And a lot of people were upset the Leafs didn't chase Askarov, a guy with 3 games in the NHL. Really, he wouldn't have his shot here. I think they're already set with Woll and Stolarz. So what's the point in going there and spending the assets? And especially, like I said, the pipeline for goalies is probably the best it's been in a long time for that position.
Yeah, well, even a guy like Woll, right? You want the organization like to see one of their drafted guys become that guy, because it just has been so long since it has happened, right? So in that. So but like you say, it's the depth there. It seems to be a little more meat on that bone than there has been in recent years. So
well, there was a time when you couldn't really name a Leafs goalie prospect unless they were just playing down the street. It was Kaskasuo and those guys playing down at the Marlies. So, and that was
Ian Scott, bad luck with Ian Scott and the injuries that ended his career prematurely. But those things do happen, and you have to recover from them. And right now, at least, it looks like the Leafs have done some good drafting in that regard. But we'll see.
We'll see. Well, one guy we will see a lot more of for the next few seasons is Max Domi. Mm-hmm. He signs his extension with the Maple Leafs, does the video, the rah-rah. What do you make of Max Domi staying a Maple Leaf? For me, I'm excited, obviously. I love the way he played second half of the season. Kind of found his footing, kind of like the spotlight wasn't bothering him as much. Really figured himself out on the ice with his teammates, what he needed to do to be the best, but also the connection with Austin Matthews. Mm-hmm. Really was able to dish that biscuit pretty well and have Matthews set up for some goals, and obviously upped his point total as well. So Max Domi earned himself the contract. I like what it is, like how he stands up for his guys. But what do you see in Max Domi staying with the Maple Leafs?
Well, I think they learned last year you can move him around a bit. And like you said, the good chemistry with Austin Matthews when they did play together. And, he's one of these guys that could be a bit of a moving part for them in camp. And where does he fit best when everybody is healthy, right? He bounced around a bit. And with Max Domi, you have to hope that one season at least was an indication that he's figured it out to a degree. He's a smart hockey player, James. There's no taking that away from him. I mean, his ability to pass the puck is elite. But it's on him now a bit to prove this now. And you got your contract, you're settled, you're entrenched in the place you always wanted to play in. Like you said, there was no certainly with his dad, the way that Ty played here, there was never any impact of pressure or anything like that. And I don't think you'll see that with Domi. I think the other side of that coin is true, that he just soaks this stuff up and loves that attention with it, and Leafs Nation and everything. It's just, we see that his interactions on social media and how much he eats that up, and just always wanted to be here. Okay, now go show us that you can be this player now over a longer term contract, which you haven't had in recent years in the National Hockey League. He plays a lot of teams. So I think Domi's one of those guys that where he might be on the first day of camp or in the first preseason game that he is in might not necessarily be where he winds up for the October 9th opener in Montreal. But that's not a bad thing. I think I think you can move him around and figure that out and decide where he fits best. But you can't go wrong with a guy who has the enthusiasm that he has, and the desire and to make it work here in Toronto, like I said, where he's always wanted to be, I think, since his career started.
Yeah, well, it's infectious too. Obviously, fans love it. Fans love the fact when he gets out there and he's chirping and having fun and doing all those fun things on the ice with his teammates, obviously sticking up for guys. That's something this city craves. We love it. We love watching it. So I'll leave the end of this show like this. I want to ask you the question about the Leafs and the standings in the Atlantic Division.
Yeah.
For me, I look at the Atlantic Division here and say, okay, Tampa's taken a step back, in my opinion, with what they've had to shed.
Yeah.
Look at Boston. I don't know how the chemistry is going to go with the new guys they bring in. They got the little big Z. They got Lindholm. But I'm looking at the Florida Panthers, 2 Stanley Cups in a row. They've lost a lot off their roster. Do these things start to catch up on them? And does this give the Leafs the opportunity, maybe, if everything falls the way it may, to be the tops of the Atlantic Division? Or do you see someone new creeping up this year and taking a playoff spot?
Well, the top 4 to start with. Yes, the 3 teams other than the Leafs you mentioned have lost players. There's no doubt. I mean, really Boston. Boston perhaps not so much, but you want to see how Lindholm works, Zadorov. You get the Swayman thing worked out. We thought Boston was going to take a step back last year without Bergeron and Krejci, and it didn't really happen. I mean, you're going to take a step back from that season they had because it was ridiculous.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, it didn't happen once things got going. Once the regular season started, Florida still has the guy in net who got it back on track last year. They return all of their top end forwards for the most part. Montour, the blue line is going to be a hit. But
Oliver Ekman-Larsson
too. We'll see what kind of an impact Nate Schmidt can have there. But you cannot buy that Stanley Cup experience, James. There's winning. I mean, remember last year the Panthers were in whenever it was for their first visits. It might have been in November. And Paul Maurice talking about, this is after the skate, I think, in the morning. No, did we win the cup last year? No, but do we think that experience of getting that far and playing that as long as we did can help? Yes, we do. And he was right in the end. It did. And, a determining factor for them in the cup final winning against Edmonton. So the guys that are still there, that's still there. And Tampa Bay, to me, is a bit of the wild card in all this because, I just still can't wrap my head around Steven Stamkos playing anywhere else. Like, that is going to be so bizarre when you see those first shifts, the National Predators. Will it backfire on them? I don't know. Is Jake Gensel a good ad? I think he really is. But Stamkos was the face of the franchise, period. Now, again, if Andre Vasilevskiy's health is on the right side of it, you can't count them out. But at some point, something has to happen here, right? You're not going to have the same top 4 all the time.
No.
But on the other side of it, we keep talking about, okay, is this going to hear the Sabres break through, the Red Wings? Ottawa keeps talking about the rebuild being done, but they don't get to the playoffs. And I think Montreal Canadiens, I like the addition of Laine and what that could bring, but I still think that they're a little bit away yet. But, and look at the Red Wings last year, James. They're in the playoffs, if not for the regulation wins thing with the Capitals, right? Same amount of points, and they don't get it. The Caps have more reg wins. So we'll see. I think it's going to be tight. I think it's going to be competitive every night. But I as far as the Leafs go, top 3 for sure. unless the goaltending falls off the tracks and that just blows up and it's worse than anyone could have imagined. I don't think that'll happen. So I think top three, can they take a run at the division title? I think they can. But on the same side of it, none of those three, even with losing Stamkos in Tampa and the deletions from Florida,
even with Stamkos and Sergachev, and you're bringing in older McDonough.
Yeah, right. But I don't think you still look at them and say, okay, that most definitely takes them out of the running of the top four. Because I don't think it does.
Not true.
I don't think it does. But we'll have to see. Now, one of those other teams knock on the door finally and get in. Like I said, we saw how close Detroit was. Buffalo's done some interesting things in the offseason. In goal is UPL, the guy. It looks like he's going to be. That if you have a defense core with Power, Deline, and Bowen Byram, good things are going to happen for you at some point. They just are, right?
Yeah.
Will it be this year? We'll have to see. But I just like that the Leafs are still in a very competitive division, and they know that on any night they play, it's not going to be handed to them within the division. So it's there for them, but the other three teams that have always been there in the past 4 or 5 years will probably stand there with their chest puffed out and said, "Hey, we're ready to still make some noise here as well."
No, I can respect that answer. I look at the Leafs and say I think this season might be the season. If the cards fall as they shall, which they don't usually do, but if they should, I think the Leafs can take the division this year. If the goaltending hands up and the defense is better than it's been, they may be a tough SOB to play against with Craig Berube behind the bench.
Yeah, and you know what? We didn't talk about Matthews so much in Nylander, what they can bring, but Matthews has 69 goals this year. What's to say he doesn't topple 70 and take another step forward? These guys are in the prime.
What was it, 18 or 20 posts last year too?
Yeah, exactly. So led the NHL, I believe, right?
Yeah.
So, if these guys take another step and Marner sloughs off the contract stuff, which I think he probably will, perhaps this is the year that they do break through in the playoffs. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't. And this could be the year that it does. So I like I said, I just like that, in that division, from most nights you're going against a rival, what you're going to get in them, and you have to be on your toes every night. And we've seen the Leafs get through that fine in the regular season. So let's see what happens in the playoffs.
No, well, obviously we're all waiting for the playoffs. Long ways away, but we're not a long ways away from camp now. Everything's starting to turn up and get ready. I look forward to having you back on after camp gets started. We get closer to opening night. But ladies and gentlemen, hockey is around the corner. Be sure to check out everything Terry does over on X. Make sure to follow his articles and follow him. But ladies and gentlemen, this right here is Offside Hockey Talk, where the Maple Leafs and hockey come to talk.